My name is Ettore Greco, Executive Vice President of International Affairs Institute and the head of the Institute program on multilateralism and global governance. I'm very glad to open this seminar, and I would like to thank all of you for being with us today, and a special thank to our panelists for accepting our invitation. This is the fourth outreach event that we have organized in the framework of the Young Women and Next Generation Initiative in Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. This initiative is jointly conducted by my institute, the International Affairs Institute, and the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation. Both institutes are members of the EU Consortium for Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, which includes other 4 study centers specialized in arms control and disarmament. The consortium was established in 2010 following a decision by the EU Council, and its primary responsibility is to promote and coordinate a rather wide network of study centers, which now includes more than 100 members. And the essential purpose is to promote and encourage strategic debate on how the EU can contribute to the advancement of arms control and non-proliferation agenda, and also acquire new instruments, undertake new initiatives to play a more active and dynamic role on the international scene in this field. As you know, the European Union has adopted a number of documents and also strategies to indicate how it wants to act in this field, and there is an ongoing debate, a continuous debate on how to update and review those strategies. In the framework of this consortium, we carry out a wide range of activities, such as the drafting of research and policy papers, international conferences, expert seminar, and also some educational activities. Our institute and the Vienna Center has been developing in the last couple of years this specific initiative, which is targeted to next generation students and next generation experts, and more specifically young women. And this initiative itself is articulated in various activities, including a mentorship program. The overall purpose of this initiative is to help students understand how to pursue a career in the non-proliferation and disarmament field. The initiatives involve students and young experts interested in working in international organizations or in taking part in internships, training, and capacity building initiatives. Of course, our point of departure was the clear need to address the very evident age and gender gap and imbalance in this field. We have already organized other 3 outreach events, which has offered, I think, useful tips and insights on how the international organizations and bodies work in the field of arms control and non-proliferation, and we have involved prominent experts, representatives and practitioners from a wide range already of institutions, including, of course, the European Union, International Atomic Energy Agency, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization, etc. So essentially, our purpose is, with the help of those experts, representatives of international organizations and bodies, to offer insights and suggestions on how to possibly start or develop a career in arms control and disarmament, and also in the context of those bodies and organizations. These seminars, these events have also been offer an opportunity, of course, to discuss how the research in this field and work in this field has changed over the years, and particularly in view of the changes of the international environment and new challenges that have emerged recently. Today, we will focus on the activities of other two very important bodies working on arms control and non-proliferation, the Implementation Support Unit of the Biological Weapons Convention, and the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. As you know, chemical and biological arms control has been at the very center of international attention, especially in the last few years, due to the widely perceived risk of violation of the two conventions. And those conventions are, of course, pillars of the arms control architecture, and also the actual violation that occur, especially in the case of the Chemical Weapons Convention. This has spurred a debate on how to enhance the verification, their verification system, and more generally, the measures to ensure compliance with the two treaties. As you know, the biological and chemical risk also been part of the strategic debate over the Ukraine war. So this is nowadays, I would say, a very topical issue. We want to understand essentially how these two bodies are facing this threat and look into the opportunities offered to young people to contribute to this effort. So I very much look forward to our debate, and without further ado, I have now the pleasure to give the floor to my colleague Federica Dall'Arche, who is an associate research associate at the Vienna Center for Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, and Federica will moderate the session. So, Federica, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ettore, and thank you to the EU for sponsoring these and other activities under the Young Women and Next Generation Initiative. My name is Federica Dall'Arche. I'm a senior research associate at the VCDMP, and I'm also one of the founders, together with Ettore and Elena Sokova and Mara Zarka, of the Young Women Next Generation Initiative. I have the privilege today to introduce you to Daniel Feakes and Elisabeth Waechter, respectively from the Implementation Support Unit of the Biological Weapons Convention within the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs in Geneva, and the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Mr. Feakes and Ms. Waechter will share their personal experiences working in the field and provide insights and information, including how to enter and advance a career in non-proliferation and disarmament, and specifically in the field of biological and chemical sciences. Some housekeeping rules before we go into our debate. Participants who wish to ask questions are kindly invited to use the Q&A session. After speakers' remarks, we will have a little Q&A session, so please make use of the Q&A button that you can find below the screen. And without further ado, Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Federica, and good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you may all be as well. Thanks, Federica, both first of all to you and to Ettore as well. So from VCDNP and from IAI, thank you very much for the invitation to speak to everyone today as well. It's really good to be able to speak to people here and hopefully give some insights into the topic, how to get into this field and, how to kind of build a career in the field as well. Let me just, if I can share my screen, I'll just find the right button, hopefully be able to press it. Federica, is that working okay? Can you see the screen in full screen view? Okay. Looks good. Okay, perfect. So thanks very much. I'm going to show you some slides here. This is mainly pictures. This isn't a dense text-based presentation, but to give you some ideas. But I think a lot of this will hopefully come from you all in the audience as well, in terms of your questions and your kind of comments and things as well. My role here at the moment in Geneva is I'm the head of, as Federica said, the implementation support unit of the Biological Weapons Convention. I should start with an apology to Federica and Mara and colleagues that I've been a bit kind of quiet lately in reply to your emails and things. I've also, as well as my day job that you can see here, I've also for the last few months been the officer in charge of the whole Geneva branch of the Office for Disarmament Affairs as well, because my boss has been on maternity leave. So I've been kind of trying to do two things at the same time. So it's been tricky, and apologies again for my silence on some things, but I'm happy I was, this email came at the right time, that I actually saw it, responded to it, to this invitation for this. So yeah, happy obviously to do this. My background, just perhaps a couple of minutes may be useful just to explain kind of how I got into this business. I mean, I've basically, some people I think, come into this kind of area maybe for a few years, or come in from a different, a different topic. They particularly now working for the UN Secretariat. You see people that come in, for a few years, then go on to do another area, peacekeeping or human rights or something completely different. But then there are people like me as well who have been basically doing this forever and a day. I started out almost as soon as I've graduated from university. I did my master's degree in contemporary European studies at Sussex University in the UK. So nothing to do with chemical or biological weapons or disarmament, but I was always interested in kind of security issues. And I, just by kind of luck and happenstance, basically, I started as an intern working for a small academic program at the university on chemical and biological weapons issues. And that's basically, that was in 1995, 96. And I've basically been doing the same, pretty much the same thing ever since, either from an academic point of view. I did that for about 10 years or so at the university. And then also from the role I'm in now, basically as an international civil servant, first working at the OPCW, where Elisabeth is now. I was a staff member there from 2009 to 2014. And then, like I said here, from 2014 to today in this particular role as well. So yeah, I never had any designs to get into, never any intentions to get into this particular subject area. And as I said, my master's degree was in European studies. My first degree was actually in history. So I'm definitely also not, I should make that very clear from the beginning, not a technical person. I am neither a chemist nor a biologist. In fact, I stopped doing both sciences when I was probably like 16 or something like that. So whenever conversations get very technical, I go very quiet and nod wisely, and that's about as far as it goes. So I'm, I guess, living proof that to work in this area for a long time, you do not necessarily need to have a scientific background. But yeah, happy to talk more about how I got into it and explain. But like I said, I started out as an intern. I think that's how many people start out in this field. And as I said, I'm one of the types of people that have basically been doing the same thing, like I said, now for more than 20 years, I think. So most of my career. But I can talk more about that if people are interested. I just wanted to kind of just first of all go through a couple of slides. Hopefully most people know what the Biological Weapons Convention is, but I'll just quickly run through this anyway, and particularly to give you a sense of comparison between the BWC and the OPCW as well. So the BWC is an old convention. You can see it's actually 1972, so 50 years this year. In fact, in a few days' time, the 10th of April 1972 was when the convention opened for signature, entered into force a couple of years later in 75. It's the first multilateral disarmament treaty to ban an entire category of weapons of mass destruction. You can see the other highlights of the convention here on the screen. It's almost, but not quite universal. 183 states parties, 14 states that have yet to join it. It's very much, like I said, 50 years since it entered into force, so it's very much a product of its time. It's a product of the Cold War. The negotiations began in the late 1960s, just after the NPT had been negotiated here in Geneva, and you can see some of the pictures from the conference room. And also the two co-chairs, as they were at the time of the Conference on Disarmament here in Geneva as well. So very much a product of that era of the Cold War, the kind of bipolar superpower relationship. But obviously it still exists 50 years later, and it's had to kind of adapt and move with the times as well. The BWC codifies a fairly long-standing, widespread norm against the use of disease as a weapon. Some people talk about public health in reverse, some people talk about deliberate disease, but however you describe it, the idea of using disease, the same as with the idea of using poison as a weapon of war, is long been taboo, has long been abhorrent. And you can see here one of the quotes from the preamble of the convention saying that use would be repugnant to the conscience of, it says here, mankind. This was written in the 1970s. So obviously they wouldn't use the same term today, but repugnant to the conscience of humanity. And I think it gets across that abhorrence that is cross-cultural, cross-generational, and very long-standing, the abhorrence, the repugnance of the idea of using disease and poison as weapons. As I said, it's a comprehensive convention. I won't run through all of these. These are the main articles of the convention. It is at its heart a disarmament convention, but it also has provisions relating to development, to assistance, to investigation, and so on as well. Its main functions, I already spoke about the unequivocal norm against biological weapons, but it also provides a forum for dialogue, provisions, as I just mentioned, for assistance and cooperation. It very much like the Chemical Weapons Convention, also promotes the peaceful uses, in this case of biology. It has mechanisms for consultation and cooperation, and it also provides a platform for building transparency among its states parties through what we call confidence building measures. These are annual reports that states parties are meant to submit and share with each other. Now, one of the thing I really wanted to emphasize, and this will probably come up again and again, particularly when Elisabeth speaks about OPCW, is the huge differences between the two, I can't even say organizations that are talking to you today. I mean, we are not an organization. We are, as I mentioned, an implementation support unit. Probably the most striking row of this table to look at is the one at the bottom, where it says personnel. You can see the number of people working in the two main organizations dealing with nuclear weapons, the IAEA and the CTBT, both in Vienna. You've got over 2,500 people working there. Chemical weapons, you have, I'm not sure the exact numbers these days, but maybe over 400 working at the OPCW in The Hague. Here in Geneva, working on the BWC in my implementation support unit here, we have 3 people, me and 2 other people. So we are really not talking about an organization in the sense for biological weapons. But obviously we are, and I'll move on, I'll go to this one first actually. So what the implementation support unit is, it's the first institutional presence for the BWC. Before 2007, when it was established, there were just temporary staff or part-time staff within the Office for Disarmament Affairs who spent some time supporting the convention when its meetings happened. But obviously we're a small team, but we're a small team within a big organization, the UN Secretariat itself. We're within the Office for Disarmament Affairs, which is a fairly small office in the scale of things within the UN. But obviously we sit within that wider framework of the UN Secretariat with its many, many thousands of staff and offices in New York and Geneva and Nairobi and various parts of the world. You can see here we're funded by assessed contributions from states parties. We also have voluntary contributions from states, also from the European Union as well. So the core staff here is 3, but we do have other staff and consultants working with us as well. And I can say a bit more about that too. Just to go back to the previous slide. So there is the main reason we're so small is that there is no separate international organization and there is no verification regime. So we have no inspectors, no investigators, no people evaluating declarations, all of the things that OPCW does do in that respect in terms of verification, we don't do. So we don't have a mandate to be any bigger, basically. The BWC, therefore, is basically implemented by its states parties. They do have meetings here in Geneva. Multilateral meetings take place every year. Every 5 years, we have a review conference, and that's what we're actually gearing up for now this year. It should actually have happened last year, but because of the pandemic, that wasn't possible. So it's going to take place later this year instead. The states parties, the 183 that I mentioned before, are organized into 3 regional groups. And again, acknowledging the age of the convention rather than the Secretary General of the UN being the treaty's depository like it is for the Chemical Weapons Convention. We have 3 depository governments: the Russian Federation, which took the place of the USSR when that country dissolved, the UK and the United States are the 3 depository governments. So that's the kind of institutional setting. So, just again to emphasize, we are a very, very small team. So not really the kind of organization in the sense of somewhere you could have a defined career path or a long-term career, because the office itself is so small. But then, as I mentioned, we are a unit within an office within the UN Secretariat, which is obviously a much bigger entity, and which, like many people do, you can actually forge a long-term career in the UN Secretariat as a whole. And it's possible to move around between bits. And I guess I'm an example of that as well. I started, as I mentioned, as an academic, so completely outside of the system, and then joined the OPCW. And then from the OPCW, I moved across to this post with the UN Secretariat. So, those things are possible. Elisabeth, I think, you have other experiences of doing similar as well. And I think we probably have many colleagues in common from The Hague, from Geneva, from Vienna, that have bounced around between different disarmament organizations as well. I just wanted to now just spend some time just going through some of, because I think one important thing here is to flag some of the opportunities that are available to you that are following this webinar today. So I'll talk first of all about some of the things that our office, so this is the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs as a whole, has on offer. Now, lots of this is available. You can see hopefully the web links at the top of these screenshots here. You can pick up lots of these things just by Googling for the particular titles and things, or looking at the ODA website itself. But the office has been doing a lot, and particularly my colleagues in New York have been doing a lot in the last couple of years, particularly with funding from Germany and South Korea, on this Youth for Disarmament initiative, as they call it. You can see the main website here. A lot of this relates back to relevant resolutions of the General Assembly, for example. There's obviously relevant resolutions on women, peace and security, but also resolutions actually on youth in disarmament and non-proliferation, and also on disarmament education as well. So I would recommend you, if you haven't already, to take a look at this particular website here, youthfordisarmament.org. It also has various sections. It has this one, which I thought was particularly relevant, about career opportunities, including internships. I could say more about internships. We rely particularly heavily here on our interns. We have a couple of interns working with us at the moment, one from China, one from Russia, one from Italy, who's just joined us in the last couple of weeks as well. And as an office here and in New York, we have a lot of interns always coming through. I can say more about the UN internship. Again, it's not our internship program, it's the UN internship program. Then there are other options for people, with slightly more experience, or rather than who have just or still studying, which is mainly for the internships are for. Then there's also the young professional program, the junior professional officer program as well. You can see some other opportunities here on the screen. So this webpage anyway is a good one to take a look, because it collates a lot of links here all in one page. And then on the main UN careers website, there's this webpage about the JPO program, the Junior Professional Officer program, which is the kind of entry for a lot of people into the UN Secretariat. We have JPO working with us at the moment on an EU-funded project from France. Within the wider office, we have many more JPOs working as well. One just joined us within the last couple of weeks here in the office from South Korea, for example. And then the Young Professionals program is another way in as well. Again, I won't give you, I to be honest, I myself don't know that much about the programs and the eligibility and everything, but you can see they both have websites. Again, it's quite easy just to Google to find out more about these things as well. In ODA, we also have this website for disarmament education as well. Again, some of you may be familiar with this already. And there's various programs which the office is running for young people in disarmament. There's a kind of a scholarship program. In fact, we just had a group of young fellows in disarmament visiting us here in Geneva just a couple of weeks ago under a program that's funded by Germany. And then there's other programs as well, one going on at the moment funded by Republic of Korea. So again, I would recommend to look at the ODA website, keep an eye on Twitter and Instagram as well, where they advertise all of these different opportunities that are coming up. For anyone that's more technically focused, or more particularly in the case of the issues that we work on the biological sciences, and I don't know if anyone in the audience comes from that background, but there are also a lot of opportunities out there nowadays for people with more technical backgrounds as well, particularly in the biological sciences. This is an example of the Next Generation for Biosecurity competition. It's an annual competition, which has just recently, you can see March the 8th, it's the date there. So this is something that's open now. If anyone would be interested, again, you can find that by Googling. The International Federation of Biosafety Associations, and another organization which runs a mentorship program. Again, this is much more technical. This is really for people working in labs around the world as well, and they do various accreditation, they do exams and things like that as well, so you can actually get professional qualifications as well. IGEM is the International Genetic Engineered Machine. This basically runs an annual competition for students. This is from high school upwards, so high school students can participate, university students as well, where they actually use synthetic biology to do really kind of exciting experiments. And every year they have the Jamboree, as you can see this year happening in Paris. Obviously been done virtually for the last couple of years, but IGEM is again another way for particularly young scientists to get involved in this area. They often send people to attend our BWC meetings here in Geneva as well. The Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security in the US runs the Emerging Leaders in Biosecurity Fellowship. Again, more details you can find about that on the internet, but that's usually a group, as it says here, has got about 200 alumni, but it's an annual program, around about 30 people every year who, get to they come to BWC meetings, they get to meet with policymakers in different countries, visit the World Health Organization and basically network. And lots of these people have gone on to other positions in the kind of biosecurity field more widely. Similar here as well, we've got various activities. The one on the right is something that we ourselves organized just recently. We did a workshop for in cooperation with Kenya just a couple of weeks, or last week I think it was. We had about 400 Kenyan biology students online for that particular workshop, making them aware of the BWC, but also explaining to them similar opportunities as I'm explaining to you now as well, particularly for capacity building, for training, particularly for students coming from developing countries as well, like Kenya. And another thing that we've been running for the last 3 years is this biosecurity diplomacy workshop for young scientists from the Global South, started back in 2019. We just literally finished the 3rd edition of it a week or two ago as well. And you can see on the screen here the kind of stats for the one that we organized most recently. It's a fairly small group of people, only 30 of them, usually with slightly more women scientists. That again, it's one of the objectives is to focus on women scientists as well. It's for the last 2 years, obviously it's been done virtually because of the pandemic, but back in 2019 we were able to actually organize it with a physical workshop here in Geneva. You can see the picture there on the right was when the people were actually able to come, and then like I said, the rest of it unfortunately has been done virtually, but it's actually worked surprisingly well virtually, and we've had staggered it over a series of weeks, and people have continued chatting. There's a WhatsApp group and everything that we've added the 3 annual cohorts too, so everyone stays very much in touch with each other and sharing information and opportunities. Some of these people have gone on to publish things together, for example, articles in scientific journals and things. This is just an example of what I was just saying. Actually, the bottom left is one of the articles that was published recently by some of the alumni from that particular program. And we've also organized some side events on this particular program in collaboration with the partners that you can see on the picture on the right here as well during BWC meetings as well. And one of the things that has basically come from the participants themselves, the young scientists, was the idea of a youth declaration for biosecurity, which they developed themselves, a small group of them authored it, bounced it around between themselves and other people. And then, you know, it's now there on the website. It's open for other people to sign on to as well. So again, it's just another example of the opportunities that can arise from this kind of networking and, you know, the kind of collective brain power, the collective activism and, you know, dedication and commitment of people working in these networks as well. And we've really kind of built up, it's basically been a network of different networks, basically, because lots of these people are members of other networks and they kind of bring those networks in. They also, you know, well connected often at the national level as well. So they're real, you know, kind of amplifiers and reinforcing messages and the things that they learn that they can then pass on to other people that, you know, that aren't able to participate, for example, in a fellowship program, but what they learn can be passed on to others within their own countries, for example. That's the end. Sorry, it's just a bit of an abrupt stop, but that's the end of what I wanted to show you. But I'm obviously, you know, happy to try and answer questions or offer more kind of, you know, insights into how I got into things, or, you know, how to try and, as I said before, forge a career. It's not always easy. I mean, you know, contracts are sometimes temporary, or organizations have policies where you have to leave after a certain number of years. So but you know, there are ways to do this as well. And I think nowadays, actually, going through the things I've just showed you, there are actually many more opportunities. You know, this webinar and the initiative by VCDNP, IAI, you know, is something that didn't exist when I was getting into this field, you know, a couple of decades ago. So I think, you know, it's quite a lot of opportunities out there now as well. But anyway, I think I'll stop there, but obviously happy to come back and answer questions, respond to comments and things. Thanks, Federica.
Thanks to you, Daniel. Thanks for this comprehensive presentation of the work of the BWC, the implementing unit, and also for flagging all these opportunities that are out there. And also, if you allow me, kudos to you and your work, especially being such a small office. I didn't know that. But with that, Elisabeth, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Federica, and thank you for the invitation, Ettore, and to the Institute and to the VCDNP. And thank you. I want to add a word of thanks also to Daniel, because I've also learned a lot about the BWC. I have to admit that was one of the areas where I knew the least about in terms of disarmament affairs. So I am also going to share my screen. I have a couple of slides, but maybe while I figure this out. There we go. Is that working?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So my name is Elisabeth Waechter. I am the head of the public affairs branch of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, and that's our headquarters here in The Hague. And I should point out that I've been in this role for about 6-7 weeks, so I'm very new to the organization. So I had to read up on a lot of things to prepare myself for today. But maybe a few words about myself as well. I'm actually one of these people that Daniel referred to, that bounce around a lot in various UN offices and various UN roles. I've worked for the United Nations, or the bigger picture, bigger family of the UN, for the past 17 years. I actually started my career with the European Union. I worked for a few years with the European Union in Ukraine, of all places, and then I joined the UN through the competitive recruitment examination, which is now known as the YPP, the Young Professional Program, in 2005. And I was with the UN Environment Program in Nairobi. I worked for the UN Information Service in Vienna. I worked with, actually that's where I've just come from. I was with the UN headquarters in New York, working for the Department of Global Communications. And I also spent 4 years as the head of public information for the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization. So all of my career has been in international organizations in communications. And I've had kind of a soft spot and an affinity with the disarmament field. So maybe next step will be BWC. I've done nuclear, I've done now I'm doing chemical, next will be biological. So that's how I ended up here. And yeah, like I said, I'm quite new to the role, and it is indeed a fascinating topic and a very, very important topic, as Ettore mentioned in his opening statement. I always felt when I was with CTBTO that weapons of mass destruction, arms control, non-proliferation were not getting the public attention that they deserved. These are existential threats we are facing as the world, as the humanity. And unfortunately, current events have kind of propelled some of these concerns and some of these worries into the public consciousness again. And I think all of us are trying our best from a communications point of view, to make sure that people have the facts, that they have the correct information in order to be able to have an opinion and potentially, encourage policymakers to make the right decisions in these areas. So just a really very quick kind of whistle-stop tour of the OPCW. So we are the implementing body, or the organization that is charged with looking after the Chemical Weapons Convention. The Chemical Weapons Convention is a legally binding document that basically spells out the ban on the development, production, stockpiling, transfer, and use of chemical weapons. We're very proud to have been the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2013 for the efforts to eliminate chemical weapons. I wasn't here at the time, but I'm still proud to work for a Nobel Peace Prize winning organization. And it's actually really interesting to see how many disarmament bodies have been recipients of the Nobel Peace Prize. So there's a real recognition of the importance of disarmament, arms control, non-proliferation to, making the world a safer place. Chemical weapons themselves have been, I think, in the public consciousness for over 100 years. They were used to devastating effect during the First World War, and I thought it was interesting what Daniel was saying about this feeling of moral repugnance and real moral outrage at the use of these horrific weapons that cause an enormous amount of death, but also long-lasting disability, pain, and suffering. This is a picture of British soldiers who were blinded by mustard gas during the First World War. Right after the end of the First World War, there was one of the first kind of arms control agreements, the so-called Geneva Protocol, was adopted by countries aiming to ban the use of chemical weapons in war because everybody was dealing with the aftermath and literally millions of soldiers having been disfigured or killed, not to mention the traumatic psychological effects of these weapons. So 1925, the Geneva Protocol. It then took quite a long time for the world to get its act together, and the Chemical Weapons Convention actually opened for signature in 1993. And the difference between the Geneva Protocol and the Chemical Weapons Convention is that it's not just banning the use of chemical weapons, but it's banning the production, the transfer, the stockpiling, and the development of these weapons. So we want to get rid of them completely forever and not just have them sitting somewhere as a supposedly as a deterrent. It's maybe just a quick sideline what we mean when we talk about chemical weapons. It's quite a comprehensive definition. So it's both the chemicals themselves, it's the precursors to chemicals, so the things that you need to make a chemical weapon, but it's also the munitions, so the containers used to house and deliver some of these horrific weapons, as well as the equipment required to produce both the containers, the munitions, and the chemicals. So it really is very, very comprehensive. The definition according to the convention, and I'm going to read it to get it right, is a toxical chemical or its precursor that can cause death or harm to humans or animals through its chemical action on life processes. So anything that is meant to harm, kill, maim, otherwise impair a chemical that is used for those purposes is considered a chemical weapon. Again, there's distinctions between different types of chemicals that can have different effects on the body. So we talk about choking agents, so things that make it difficult to breathe, for example, chlorine, blood agents. I had some examples written out and I can't find them. Blood agents that affect the ability of your blood to transport oxygen, for example. I think hydrogen cyanide is one of those examples. Blister agents, so ones that attack the skin, and nerve agents, such as sarin. People have heard of sarin, that inhibit the ability of your nervous system to process information. Now, of these, usually nerve agents are the ones that are most lethal. The other three are in many cases not lethal, but they can cause long-term health problems, lifelong disability, difficulty breathing, and disfigurement as well, blinding. I had the picture earlier of the soldiers affected by mustard gas. So the convention, we like to say, has been incredibly successful through the verification and through the elimination part of the work of the OPCW, but also of the member states or states parties to the convention. Over 99% of declared chemical stockpiles have been verifiably destroyed. We're awaiting the last remaining bits to be destroyed, and we think that will be achieved by next year. So that's going to be a really important milestone for us to celebrate. But that doesn't mean that our work is over. There's been this idea that, okay, we've destroyed all the stockpiles, we can stop work. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So there's a lot of focus on preventing the reemergence of chemical weapons through a number of different mechanisms. If there is a use, the organization is set up to respond to that use by providing technical assistance to a state party, but also by training national authorities in various responses. Just like the Biological Weapons Convention, there's also, of course, an element of promoting the use of chemistry for peace purposes. We have our review conference, or the review conference of the Chemical Weapons Convention will actually take place next year. And I think there's an anticipation that there will be quite a lot of debate on how this can be expanded further and how more can be done. For example, there's a growing interest in cooperating more closely with the chemical industry, as well as with academic institutions to promote the peaceful uses of chemistry. We support national implementation, so member states have national bodies that help implement implement the convention on the national level, and we support them. We do training, we do capacity building in many of these countries. One area that the section that I work in is concerned with, the External Relations Division, is to achieve the universality of the convention. At the moment, we have 193 member states, just like the UN. It's not quite the same. We have 4 that aren't in the UN, and then there are 1 state that has signed the convention but has not ratified it, and 3 states that are still outside of this global norm. And finally, the convention, or the OPCW, also works to support the victims of chemical weapons, to remember victims, work with them, and there's a trust fund, and there's training available to deal with the aftermath, and we work with victims organizations to help them deal with these long-term effects of the use of these weapons. That's all I have for now. I kind of zoomed through it because I did want to make sure that we have enough time to take questions at the end. I would encourage you to follow us on social media. There's a lot of details also on our website. It's opcw.org. So if you're interested in reading the full convention text, if you want to see, understand more about the technical side of it, like Daniel, I'm not a scientist. My degrees are in very similar. I have a degree in Russian studies and in communications. But I'm always learning more, and I feel that the area of kind of science communication around disarmament is a lot to do there, and it's fascinating. So yeah, we're on Twitter and on Facebook. We're also on LinkedIn. And as an aside, OPCW is one of the non-career organizations that Daniel referred to. So there's a tenure policy, which means we have quite a high turnover in staffing. It means we're always recruiting. So I would really encourage you to have a look at LinkedIn, the website, employment page on the website, to see what opportunities there are. And we love our interns like everybody. We're in the very fortunate position that, unlike the UN Secretariat, we actually provide a small stipend to interns. I think there's a current internship announcement that I think closes today. So you have a few hours to get your application in quickly, but otherwise there'll be another call for internships later in the summer. And internships and employment could be in any area. We have interns obviously working with us in public affairs. We have interns in the legal department, but then of course also colleagues with of a more scientific background. We have colleagues who have a military background, investigations, capacity building, training. So lots of different options and opportunities there. So I will leave it at that and hand back to Federica, and we have, I think, a little bit of time to take some questions still.
Thank you so much, Elisabeth, for this very interesting presentation, and congratulations on the new role, actually. So we actually do have some time. We have about 20 minutes, I would say. Our engagement will end at 4:15. So I see that there are a couple of questions in the Q&A, but I would encourage our viewers to feel free to write more questions. And while they do that, I actually would like to take the opportunity to ask both our speakers about the skills and competencies that you would suggest the next generation to acquire in order to enter either a position or an internship. What are the most required skills that that you particularly find useful in an intern? We can start with Daniel, and then we can go to Elisabeth.
Thanks, Federica. Yeah, no, it's a very good question. Obviously, something people are very, very interested in knowing. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to say, to give one straight answer. I mean, partly depends on what you're looking for. I mean, particularly with interns, and in our office here, again, maybe different for OPCW with so many different kind of different departments and even technical departments and things. I know, for example, the office I was in at OPCW, had a strong interest in interns with a very scientific background. They were almost like doing experiments and kind of infographics and things like that. So that's one thing. But I think for us here, it's mainly we call them political affairs interns. So it's often people that have a background in international relations or kind of region studies, politics, those as academic backgrounds. Those kinds of things are the things that are usually most appropriate. But again, in addition to that, other skills can also help kind of, make you stand out from the crowd in a way. So particularly these days, anything that is, related to social media, for example, layout and design of publications and kind of, again, infographics, so those kind of additional skills as well, certainly do help people stand out from the crowd a bit. Language skills also obviously important. I mean, here even though we're in Geneva, it's a very francophone city, but within the UN, on a day-to-day basis, everything is done in English. Things are drafted in English. Most meetings happen in English. So, good English is obviously really, really important. I mean, almost every job advert will say that fluency in English is a requirement. It's essential. Knowledge of French is often desirable. Other languages, also a good asset to have. So language skills certainly an important thing, and knowing English and knowing French is very good, and then knowing something on top of that is also a great thing to have as well. Technical knowledge or knowledge of the particular field itself is not such, particularly at the level of interns, but also at the entry level as well, is not such an issue. And as I said, I've worked in most of my life in organizations to do with chemical and biological weapons without having any kind of higher education level qualifications in either science. So that's not a barrier to getting into these fields either. So it's a lot to do with these kinds of transferable skills, language skills. Like I said, something kind of IT related is often quite useful, particularly from where we are at the moment. We don't have a kind of dedicated IT or communications department, so we're always keen to get people that have those skills besides the kind of more standard kind of political or international relations backgrounds as well. But yeah, sorry, maybe I'll stop there for now, and happy to come back again if necessary. Thanks, Federica.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. Oh, please, Elisabeth.
Yeah, just a few additional thoughts. I completely agree with everything that Daniel said, especially on the transferable skills level. There's this understanding of core competencies that the UN promotes, and I think that's a good way to look at it. That you look at, how your experience thus far, and it could be experience in a part-time job or experience in your academic setting, helps you develop skills such as teamwork or even leadership skills, creativity, kind of thinking outside the box. So those are really helpful. I think the two main things, or the three main things that I would look for in an intern are yes, you do look at the technical skills to a certain extent, but you want somebody where you feel that they are open-minded, that they come with a real desire to learn. The internship is not just a way for, to get a foot in the door to get a next job, or for us to have, cheap or free labor. It really is a learning relationship. So we want interns to come and be open-minded and ready and willing to learn, and kind of also, force us to help them learn. The other thing that I find is the intercultural communications is very, very important. Coming here, being open-minded, being willing and interested in learning to work with people who come from all over the world. We're probably not the best example of the multi ethnic environment that we have become used to working in, but we have colleagues who come from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America, and it does take a certain level of skill, and it's something you should be willing to be open to learn to work in that environment. And the last thing I think is really important to bring with you is just the sense of patience. Working for an international organization such as the OPCW or the UN or any other international organization is not the same as working for an NGO. We're not out there holding placards changing the world. The way we change the world is in very, very small incremental steps. And at the end of the day, it's the member states who call the shots. So things can take a long time. I've had interns. I always like to tell this story. Many years ago in the UN, I had an intern. At the end of the internship, I always like to have a conversation with them to say, well, how was it? Did you enjoy it? What did you learn? And he said, it was great, thank you very much. And what I learned is I don't want to work for the UN. So, but at least he was honest. And he said, this is interesting and it's fascinating what you do. But to me, it's not enough action. It's not enough stuff. I want to be hands-on. I want to do something. We do things, but a lot of it is about writing a report, compiling information, sitting in a long meeting and listening to member states basically say what they're going to say. But that's part of the job, and that, it takes a long time, but it actually is something that we feel is, it does achieve a result in the end. So, and in terms of just really quickly, in terms of technical skills that may be required in general, the two big areas where I think everybody is really desperately looking for people is monitoring and evaluation and data analysis. Those are, I think, have been identified by most human resources departments in the international organizations as growth areas. Going to be lots of jobs created at kind of entry level, mid-career level in those areas. So if that's something that you can develop skills in while you're in university or in an internship, I think you almost are guaranteed a job.
Thank you so much, Elisabeth, also for giving us a glimpse of what the day-to-day work looks like too. Everybody wants to work at international organizations, but sometimes it's even difficult to understand what are the day-to-day to do things and so I think that was a
challenges. Say it. It's okay. There are challenges.
So thank you so much for raising that point. So we talked about language skill, intercultural relationship, open-mindedness, willingness to learn. These are extremely important. I would agree. We have a question from one of our participants, Henrik. He or she has a question regarding, I would summarize it because it's quite long, but basically he or she, and I apologize, I don't see the pronoun, has done quite a lot of work. He or she has a very high GPA, has been awarded academic performances, but yet was not able to get an internship. So following up on this, on his or her remark, how realistic it is to enter a position, a junior position, you think, even if you have not done a junior position, even if you have not done an internship at one of the agencies. Again, I'll go with Daniel and then we'll go back to Elisabeth.
Thanks, Federica, and yeah, thanks to Heinrich for the question as well. It's a good question. I mean, there's a couple of questions I think in there, or a couple of issues at least in his question as well. I think, I mean, one issue is, and interns and others have said to us in the past, is a kind of catch-22, because we advertise entry-level jobs, but then even the entry-level jobs require sometimes, like, 2, 3 or even more years of experience. So people are saying, well, how can this be an entry-level job if we already need to have the experience beforehand? So it can be very hard for people to get that initial work experience that then enables them to get like the P2 job, which is the kind of entry-level job in the UN system or in other international organizations as well. And part of this relates back to the issue of kind of fairness and equity as well, because as Elisabeth pointed out, and as I should have said myself, when I mentioned the UN internships, the policy in the UN, so UN Secretariat internships are unpaid. And I mean, all of us, I think, that work in the UN system that have interns think this is terrible and think it's completely unfair. And, we completely recognize the implications. That means that people from certain parts of the world generally can't take an internship. And, that's just not right, basically. But it's the UN's policy. It's not something that we can change as the Secretariat. It's basically a decision of member states. So even though member states may complain that the that the kind of geographic distribution of interns is not equitable, the decision is theirs, because obviously to pay the interns would require more money, which would require an increase in the budget, which they then don't want to agree to. So it's great to hear that OPCW, like many other non-UN organizations, is now able to pay its interns. It's unfortunately just something that we can't do. So yeah, again, that makes it harder for people to find that pre-entry level work experience if the internships require you to basically to fund yourself, and particularly to fund yourself in a city like Geneva, one of the most expensive cities in the world. So that's an issue. I mean, one thing that I wanted to pick up on was, and I've heard this sometimes before, that people get internships kind of, and then have an expectation that the internship will lead on to a job, or maybe to a consultancy or something. That's not the case, and it shouldn't ever be anyone's expectation that is the case. In fact, the job adverts say it's not the case. There should be no expectation. The agreement, at least the UN internship agreement that interns actually sign, clearly says there is no expectation of employment after the internship. So, I mean, it's obviously doing an internship is gaining experience that makes you more experienced, more qualified for the job, but it certainly should not be seen as having an internship automatically means that you will then move straight into a job. That's one issue. And there's also this issue of kind of national support, I guess, in a way, like backing from your country. And I mean, you see that sometimes with certain, particularly when we open up positions here, you'll suddenly get phone calls from, sometimes depending on the level of the job, sometimes from ambassadors, or you'll be invited for coffee with someone. You'll think they'll want to talk about something substantive, then you find out that they know someone who's interested in a particular job. So that happens, but again, that is not not something from our side, at least, that we take into account. And the system is now set up, actually, when people apply for jobs, we don't see the names, we don't see the nationalities. It's a really kind of blind system these days. So we really don't see any of the personal information about the candidates. We just see their qualification, their skills, their own description of themselves and everything. We don't know where they come from. We don't know, even sometimes gender and things like that. It's as meant to be as objective as possible. So we are really looking at the skills, the experiences, and everything like that as well. I mean, one other thing I wanted to say, but I mean, I don't know if people would be interested in the kind of the interview, the recruitment process and all of that as well, because I don't know if it's a kind of unique process that the UN and the international system uses, but the interviews, I've interviewed people before who have been completely thrown by the type of interview that is conducted. So I don't know if I could stop there and maybe let Elisabeth answer the Heinrich's question and then come back to that issue if people would find that interesting, just some kind of tips and things on the interview process itself.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yes, please.
A few additional thoughts, but I'm sure colleagues will want to hear about the application process, because I agree it is quite specific. But I think just picking up on what Daniel was saying, and maybe echoing what I was saying earlier about patience. One of the reasons things take so long in all international organizations is because of the need for transparency. We have a large number of member states that we are accountable to, 193 in our case, in the case of the UN, 181 in the IAEA. So it's very important to be as transparent as possible about all of the processes, and that includes recruitment and hiring. So we have to be fair and impartial, as well as very transparent, and that's just why it takes a long time. So I'm not sure. There's this idea that, oh, you can only get a job, or you can only get an internship if you know someone, and that simply is not true. That is an absolute myth. It's surprising how many people say, well, I'm not going to bother applying because I don't stand a chance. I would really encourage you to get rid of that thinking, because if we're looking for a specific profile, it's sometimes remarkably difficult to find good candidates. And I hear this from colleagues across the system. If you see something that you think you're qualified for, if you have the right skills, if you tick the boxes, apply. Really do apply, put yourself forward, be prepared that you might get, a rejection, 10 rejections, 50 rejections, but keep applying yourself, keep, pushing yourself forward, because there will be the one process where you're going to be the perfect candidate. And, it's the short lists are often very short, and you kind of have to think, well, none of these are 100%. I wish I had more qualified candidates to choose from. So, and it really is that simple, that just kind of keep trying.
Thank you, Elisabeth. And I would like to go back a little bit to the interview process that Daniel was mentioning about. I think it would be interesting for our participants to learn what are the questions that are asked during an interview.
Yep, thanks, Federico. And yeah, I mean, I just, before that, completely echo what Elisabeth just said as well. I mean, if you don't apply for something, you don't have a chance. You can't be rejected from a job you haven't even applied for. So certainly, apply. It's obviously time consuming. The UN has tried to make it easier for people to apply. The online system that they have now, it may be still not perfect, but you create a kind of what they call a personal history profile, or maybe the name has changed, but you basically, input everything once, all of your qualifications, all of your experience, your personal data and everything, you input it once, and then you have that profile there all the time, basically. So whenever a job comes up that you want to apply for, you don't need to start from scratch every time. You use that profile to apply for, the job number 1, 2, 3, and so on. Obviously, you'll want to tweak it, and as you gain experience, you'll need to add new things and change a new qualification, or add a new job that you've had. But basically, you start, you input it all once, and then you kind of add to it. Now, for each specific job, obviously, you will want to tweak it. You don't want to be sending the same application to one job in human rights and one job in peacekeeping and one in disarmament. I often get, and that's a real kind of turn off straight away, basically, if someone sends you a cover letter that says, dear hiring manager, I really want to work for the Office for the High Commissioner of Human Rights. We're the Office for Disarmament Affairs. That's just, you just haven't done the research. So, small details maybe, but, make sure you do tweak the application. And the UN process now has got what they call it's a job fit questionnaire, I think is the title, which basically, when you apply for the job, it asks you specific questions about how your experience fits that particular job. And you only have like 200 characters. It's very, very short now. I've applied for things myself recently, and it's really hard to put everything you want to in like 200 or 500 characters. So it teaches you already to be concise. But so those things make you really focus on what you have that relates to that job. So that's just for the application process. Then sometimes there may be, if you get through the application form, there may be a written test. Again, depending on the job and everything. If you get through the written test, then there will be what they call a competency-based interview, which is the thing that I wanted to talk about, because the competency-based interview is a weird thing and is not necessarily like other interviews for other jobs in the private sector, for example. And I've seen people, come to these competency-based interviews, completely misunderstand what they are going to be asked, and they completely crash and burn during the interview. And it's actually, it's quite painful sometimes, because you can tell these people have clearly spent a lot of time doing all of the research on, for example, the Biological Weapons Convention. They know when it was open for signature. They know how many states parties it has. They know when the meetings happen. But we don't ask any questions about that during the interview, even for an interview for working on the Biological Weapons Convention. We don't ask about that stuff. It's what it says. It's a competency-based interview. So we ask people, give us an example. This is basically how it works. Give us an example of a time when you, had a big deadline coming up. How did you deal with it? So those kinds of things. That's the way it works. I mean, you can Google competency-based interview, and you can find the different strategies for answering the questions. It gives you one of the approaches is, I think, was it STAR? It's something like situation time. I can't remember now, but it's there on the internet. You can look. But please, one big piece of advice from my side is, if you get invited for something called a competency-based interview, don't just assume you're going to be asked questions about the actual organization or the treaty or the subject matter. You probably won't be asked anything about that. You will be asked to give examples of how your experiences fit to the competencies for that particular job. It's a funny way to do things. I mean, I remember, the way I dealt with it was one of the interviews I had was over the phone. So it was, it wasn't face to face. It wasn't even on the screen, but I had loads of little cards prepared for different situations that I knew and different examples. I didn't know what they were going to ask exactly. So I had loads of these. I had a big table. I had all the different cards in different, one for pile for like communication, one for teamwork, one for planning, all set out across the table. And I was just standing there, and every time they asked a question, like I said, I was on the phone, so I could just hold the phone and then just look at the different cards. Obviously, if you have a face-to-face or a screen-based interview, you can't necessarily do that, but you can probably have stuff around you still. But yeah, the one key piece, because I've seen so many people, like I said, kind of crash and burn and come prepared for the wrong type of interview. So one big piece of advice is, make sure you prepare properly for these competency-based interview rather than a kind of a subject matter-based interview. Thanks, Federica.
Thank you, Daniel. And Elisabeth, would you like to add?
Yeah, I agree fully. It can take some getting used to, but I have to admit I'm actually quite a big fan of the competency-based interview process, because it's impossible not to be prepared. You have no excuse to go into a competency-based interview unprepared. The competencies are listed in the job ad. So if you look at a job advertisement, it will tell you what competencies we're going to be asking you about. And you can be absolutely certain that if it says teamwork, one of the questions will be, well, give us an example of a time when you as a team had a big success, and how did you share that success? Or if you failed to achieve an objective, how did you deal with that? And we're looking for these transferable, these soft skills, and people being able to use their past experience to show us how they would fit into a new job, how they would fit into a team. So there's no excuse to go into a competency-based interview unprepared. One additional thing, I was just looking again at Heinrich's question, and I think the other thing that's really worth mentioning is, yes, of course, academic qualifications are important. There are a lot of jobs that you won't even make the initial computer cut. So a person will never even see you if you don't have a master's degree, or if you don't have the right kind of, paper qualifications. But once you end up on the list of the hiring manager who starts looking at qualifications, I think the focus is very much on work experience. And this doesn't have to be paid employment. This can be an internship. This can be volunteering. This can be actual hands-on field experience. I have so many, students who come or interns who come saying, oh, I think I might go and do a PhD, and I think I need a third master's degree. And I tend to discourage that, because I think you're much better off going and getting a job in the real world, getting some real life experience. And to me, those are the interns who, or even the staff members who are better prepared to work in a non-academic setting.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for this insight. Perhaps the last questions, I want to go back to the challenges that you were mentioning before related to positions. So Elisabeth, you talked a little bit about the need for patience, but Daniel, you also talked about temporary contracts. So if you can share a little bit about the challenges that you face at your work, and I want to tie that to a question that we've received from Louisa Carl, who's also asking, how does your job reward you, and what drives you in your positions?
I'm unmuted. Maybe I'll start this time.
Please.
So challenges, of course there's challenges. There's always challenges. There's never enough money. There's always too many demands. The teams are always too small. Things take a long time. There is a certain level of bureaucracy that can hamper. It's not the private sector. We can't just decide, oh, let's go out and buy a new screen. No, we have to go through procurement. There's a whole process. It has to be approved by 14 different people. And so things can take a while, and some of these things can be challenging. But is it a rewarding career? Absolutely. I've been with the UN or the UN system. I'm not currently with the UN proper, but I still feel I've been an international civil servant, I should say, for 17 years, and I can't imagine doing any other work. What drives me is the realization that what we do matters, that it's important, that to quote Dag Hammarskjöld, the world would be a worse place if we didn't have the UN or the international, the multilateral institutions. It's incredibly rewarding working with people, inspired, incredibly talented colleagues from all over the world. I find that very energizing, and we're all kind of pulling in the same direction, working to achieve a bigger goal. And yeah, that's what motivates me, and that's why I kind of think, okay, we have to jump through 18 hoops to, get this new laptop bought, but okay, it's worth it, because we're, doing our little bit to make the world a better place.
Thank you, Elisabeth. And Daniel?
Thanks, Federica. Yeah, I mean, again, agreeing with what Elisabeth just said. I mean, I think you do need kind of passion, you do need kind of motivation there to do a job, to keep on doing it day after day and to do it well. I think you do need that. And I mean, I remember I was actually there at OPCW when the Nobel Peace Prize was announced and everything. And I mean, I remember how that made everybody feel. I mean, everybody just kind of left their offices, congregated in the main kind of hall at OPCW, and basically had a kind of impromptu party. And I mean that was at the time that the OPCW was just starting out with its whole mission to remove the chemical weapons from Syria. And that really, you had a whole organization pulling together with one focus, one thing, really driving it forwards, and doing something good. And I think that that mission, anyone that's working in disarmament, at the end of the day, I mean, yes, it's bureaucratic, it's Byzantine, it's slow moving, it takes 20 years to negotiate a treaty. You have, since I've been here for 6 years, years and years of meetings where nothing really seems to happen. But still, the main purpose of what we're doing, preventing biological or chemical weapons from being developed and used, that's a kind of noble thing to be doing. So sometimes it's hard to have that in your mind. I mean, it's sometimes we get reminded of that actually by our interns. We had an intern a few years ago who said how much he enjoyed every day, like walking into the building here at the UN. We have this kind of avenue of the flags with all the flags of the member states, and he said every day he comes, he feels inspired and empowered by just walking past the flag. So sometimes for us that have been here for a few years, it's great to have, young, bright, energetic people around that kind of, again, energize us and kind of make us remember why we're doing what we're doing. And I think, when you see things going on in the world these days, you kind of think, well, what we're doing is important. It does matter. And I think the main thing that kind of keeps me going is when we actually go to places and do things, not so much what we do here in Geneva with the meetings, which are very political and everything, but it's when we go to countries. And obviously the last 2 years, we haven't really been going to many countries, but even doing training and capacity building virtually, you're helping people. You're kind of giving them information, or you're giving them new skills. You're helping, countries develop new policies or regulations, legislation and stuff. So you actually feel you're doing something concrete. So I think that's the kind of thing that keeps us going. But as Elisabeth said, I mean, there are challenges. Every day there are challenges, and dealing with member states is difficult sometimes. Just trying to get all 183 or however many it may be kind of going in the same direction is difficult. These days seems to be more and more difficult as well. So I think that that's one of the biggest challenges. But again, it makes it interesting. You're not just dealing with your own colleagues and your own management in the office. You've got this other set of clients, managers, whatever you want to call them, outside as well. And you have to find ways to, at the end of the day, we're only secretariats, which means we shouldn't really be having much of an influence. But obviously people do look to us to, I don't know, make things happen or come up with ideas or something like that. And, so you can, even as an international civil servant, you can, feel that you're having an impact as well. So, I mean, that's certainly what keeps me going, because disarmament can sometimes be quite a depressing place. So, you do need something to, some higher kind of motivation to keep you going. And I think that's what keeps me going anyway. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We are unfortunately grossly out of time. We are 10 minutes behind schedule, so I apologize for those participants who haven't had the opportunity to ask their questions, or I wasn't able to read them. But Elisabeth, Daniel, thank you so much for your time. On behalf of VI and the VCDMP, I'm extremely grateful for your availability. So again, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and insight, and look forward to working with you in the future for other initiatives and activities. And again, thank you so much, and have a lovely rest of the evening.